Hey, what's up, guys? Is METAGAMESGX here, and we are doing our monthly best budget decks of the format. These are regional winning and topping deck profiles from the last month that we are going to go over top 10 in order of what I think are the strongest options for this format. Going into Suda format, we are also going to consider. So if you guys want to see more videos like this, make sure to like and subscribe. Check out my website for t-shirts and spreadsheets and all that fun stuff. So at number 10, we do have Runic Stun, the classic, slow down, play the floodgates, use the Runic engine to draw into these floodgates kind of deck. And we still see it thriving because of innovations such as Performapal 5 Rainbow Magician, which essentially says your opponent cannot use monster effects, essentially. So, yeah, no, it's a very good card on top of Inspector Border. So, I feel like this is actually one of the cooler little options I've seen teched in. And then you have the Pod Desires as well. So, I do like the main deck Chaos Angel, SP, and then the Typhon. I feel like Chaos Angel and Typhon aren't really that required. I think Typhon is more required than anything, but those are the more expensive parts, basically half the price of the deck over at being at $90 from this Athens regional. And then you're running the rest of the runic cards, obviously, with the Baguska for maybe even just like that shifter play or stuff like that. You don't really care about shifter with this deck anyway, which is a nice part. You're also siding the Solemn Judgment, which I think is very good right now. It's one of the best side deck cards in any deck just to secure your board. So I think this is very good. Also, I think Solemn Strike could probably go in over the Grave of the Super Ancient Organism right now. I think this was really a tech for the last kind of meta, or maybe like more rogue. And then Evenly for the same reason. I feel like Evenly isn't great, but also, so I'd like run Lightning Storms over this, plus Feather Duster, and then the Roz Sphere mode, and then the Dogwood. But this list is very good, and it's the tried and true stun deck. I don't think it's as good as these other options, but I do think that even with the nerfs to stun, it's still going to be one of those decks that can sneak in a topper here or two, and that you have to be prepared for. Next, we have Infernoid. You might have thought that Infernoid was dead, but no, it's not. You can still run a Dark Fusion package, which this might potentially get better with the new Evil Hero support we'll end up seeing. I think Dark Fusion is just a cool little tech to basically make the Infernoid evil, since it just requires 2 Infernoid monsters. So you just draw a Dark Fusion, make it, and then you basically just go plus a billion if this thing resolves. So Infernoid still being alive post OSS ban is very cool, because OSS was very cool to be able to get out Decatron. And this build is only at 40 cards too, so it's not even running Reasoning. It's not one of those big ass piles, but still very cool with the droplet and then the instant fusion. There's so much gas in this kind of deck that you don't exactly need hand traps or that many board breakers kind of thing. If you start getting to play the game, you're going to be good, but there isn't anything like Reasoning or anything to really like sack your opponent, or grass looks greener. So I'm kind of surprised that this low to the ground kind of Infernoid deck did very well. You are running the Entis in the side, which is kind of crazy, I'm not gonna lie. And then you probably have options to kind of send it off of other things, and then you're running the fire package. No Zealantis though for the OTK, is just the Promethean Princess, but you're still running the Flood and the generic link package on top of a Doolittle Chimera with Crusadia Aquamax, which this card is kind of cool. Quick effect, you can tribute 1, then target 1 face-up card your opponent controls, negate its effect. So it's just a neat little link 3 negate, so that's kind of cool. And then he's also citing Fire Recovery, which this is a card, target 1 fire monster in your graveyard, summon card from your hand to the graveyard if you do special summon it. So yeah, and then it also is good effect in the graveyard to basically draw a card and recycle. So it's just like a generic, just decent card. And he's citing the other Dark Fusion, which is kind of interesting, and Void Fusion, Skill Drain, and the D barriers for the Ryzeal, and then Lightning Storm Feather Duster, which I personally just think is like the best board breaker package right now. If you can run it, if you're not running, Bestials, I think you should be running the 2 Lightning Storm and Feather Duster. I'm just running so many decks with Bestials, I can never run the Lightning Storm. I never like running Lightning Storm in decks with Bestials, because you obviously, the Bestials conflict with Lightning Storm, it turns it off. So yeah. Next, we have everyone's favorite TCG flip archetype exclusive Mimighoul, which is one of those decks that I think we saw really crop up a little bit overall with the meta, but I think that overall it's one of those fun decks that you can still make for basically under $100. This one's being a little bit more expensive, but I do think that you can actually have a really good time with this deck as long as you don't get Dominus Impulse. You do have like Thrust package, obviously they can run the Prosperity. You can run Shifter as well, which Shifter is great this format, especially with all the Fiendsmith decks, and then Ash Blossom and stuff like that. So you also get to run hand traps. And I feel like this deck might be a little bit better into next format if Impulse stays kind of not relevant. And also you get to side a bunch of just generic stuff. So overall, it's just not a bad option and probably might be the weakest option of these all, but it's not bad at it. All right, so next we have this top 8 regional from Ascension with Heroes. Heroes is making a splash. Of course, they are getting new support in Supreme Darkness, which actually is very good support in my opinion. We'll see how that goes, and I do think that it helps like kind of the deck with Fiendsmith as well with Aboku, so we'll see how that goes. I do think that Heroes is one of the better decks around. It's one of the better rogue decks for sure. It can play through multiple hand traps. It can play through like 3 to 4 hand traps depending on the hand. It's a really insane deck with really insane advantage tree with Stratos just being an insane 1-card combo with things like Malicious being at 3 with Plasma, and a hero lives with Fusion Destiny with the DPE plays, and then you can basically go into Dark Law, and then this build is siding the Dark Angel plus the D-Force. D-Force is crazy actually. This card basically makes your Plasma into a Towers. I do like the Plasma, so I actually really like D-Force. I was always confused why they didn't play D-Force. I guess it's like unsearchable, but it's still like very good. And then obviously the Feather Dust or Lightning Storm. Goo with Solemns, just very staple for this format. Deck Lockdown is something kind of we haven't seen as much. I felt like this might have been a better Floodgate in the beginning of the format, but not so much now. We'll see. It's not bad going first, obviously. If you set up your board plus Deck Lockdown, you basically win the game, and then you also evenly match. So yeah, very good, and then you can run things like Baguska plus your typical hero package, at least Baguska for the, a shifter line, essentially. So next, we have this top 8. I can't even pronounce that. I think it's a German regional, basically, with Kashtira Purely. Kashtira cards aren't the least expensive, but they aren't the most expensive between Unicorn and Fenris. There's probably the most expensive part, and then the Purely deck is basically dirt cheap at this point with so many reprints. So yeah, no, this deck is just the tried and true. You basically make Noir Turbo with SP Little Knight, and you can also have plays with like Zeus, but you also have the Kashtira package to just like add on to your end board and then also play into Nib, and then also you can go into these rank 7s like Dark Armed and Kashtira Shangri-Ira. So it's definitely very good. I feel like it gives Purely that end board. I mean, the issue with Purely though, I feel like they just have a consistency issue. So like having other play lines when you can't quite get to Noir, I feel like is pretty important, because a lot of the time Purely will just end up like dying on your bad hands, essentially going first. So I kind of like what the Cash Engine's doing. You're running Shifter as well, just as a blowout on top of Ash with no Imperm Ash for probably like the Mulch armies. I'm surprised no Imperm, but I guess there's just like no real room. And then side deck Raw Sphere mode, you don't normal summon, so that makes sense. It's basically free. And then Droll and Lockbird plus Cyclone. I feel like Droll was kind of like a budget play. I hate Droll right now. I'd be running Mulch army if you had it, but if you don't have it, then Droll's just fine. And then obviously the Cyclone, and then Feather Duster plus D-Fissure and Imperms. All right, and now we have the next deck on our list here for best budget decks, and we have Spright. Spright is one of those tried and true strategies that have been out since Power of the Elements, and it's still making waves, still taking, regional top 4s even, with a deck list that clocks in under $150. And this list is actually looking pretty similar to traditional Spright builds, with the pure package on top of the now Swap Frog package with the 1 Mirror Mage of the Ice Barrier to facilitate some really nice rank 2 plays. So that is what you like to see. And he's also main decking Board Breakers, which is interesting, with the Super Poly and the Droplet, and the Triple Tactics Talents with the Prosperity to dig for 6. And then also just the traditional Ash, Valor, and Imperm package. So I do like it, and with a pretty actually good extra deck for a, for a Spright deck, I think you're able to get to do a lot of other things, such as Dark and stuff like that. So it's definitely not that bad. You also have Nib and Droll in the side for just taking care of your meta matchups, and then going into the Cosmic and Feather Duster package for board breaking, and then Spray Gamma Burst for OTKs, because you do have little bodies, and Anti-Spell and Solemn Judgment. We've been seeing a lot of Solemn Judgment. That is a card that we have Sky Striker taking a 2nd place finish at a regional, and this is, pretty similar to the Ryan Yu list, of course, with Pot of Desires, and then the Board Breaker package of Raigeki Lightning Storm and the Upstars and into Thrust, with even some Imperms. So, it is Striker, and pretty standard striker extra deck with access code, and then the side deck full of hand traps and D barrier and DDG. So I mean, this is still one of the best board breaker decks in the whole game. Probably the best one now that Tenpai is pretty much dead outside the Fiendsmith engine. So yeah, no, it's definitely very cool to see this. And next we have Labyrinth, which got a top 8 finish at the Santa Clara Regional. And this list by Jonathan Wong, and this list was very cool. He ended up running a lot of interesting Xyz techs on the side, which I feel like only really matter for the simultaneous equation cannon for like the Ryzeal matchups. So he definitely had like that unlock, and then of course he is running the Lord of the Heavenly Prison, which, you know, you haven't seen too much lately, I feel like, but that's cool on top of the raw sphere mode. So this build is going for much more of a stun aspect. You're going to Ruma Turbo on top of D Barrier main deck with Rivalry. So yeah, definitely. And DDG. So yeah, no, this deck you do not want to lose die roll against. It doesn't run any furniture, so if it loses die roll and doesn't see the raw sphere mode, you're looking not great, but that's besides the point. We do see the Solemn Judgment once again, and we see an interesting try and guess. If each player has an extra deck, you declare one extra deck monster card type. Both players reveal their extra deck, and the player who has more cards of the declared type gains 3,000. Oh, that's for time. That's crazy. It's a really crazy time card with that. Next, we have Ritual Beast. I think Ritual Beast is one of those decks that has kind of been really good lately out of nowhere, even though Mulcharmies. And then this kind of list has Ash Blossom plus a lot of board breakers between the Dark Ruler and Book of Eclipse. This was a top 8 finish basically recently last month, and this is a really standard kind of Ritual Beast list, but it goes to show, you know, even with the Protos, and then he is running the Thunder Dragon Colossus too, plus the main deck Shifter, and the main deck Tikaboo, which is definitely something spicy, but Tikaboo is just like pretty good against Ryzeal, so I can understand that. And next we have Branded Despia from a top 4 finish. I think we covered this on the channel earlier this month, but I do think Branded's actually one of the best budget decks right now, if not, so that's why it takes my number 2 spot. I think that this deck actually has 100% a fair matchup into most of the decks, and if you look at any of the decks before Branded, you know, a lot of these decks are not able to run the hand trap packages that Ryzeal and Malice can run. So, like, they're running, like, some board breakers plus, like, a few hand traps. And in my opinion, I feel like with Branded, it's like, if you can't even go all the way with hand traps, you might as well just run like a full board breaker package. And that's what you see this build doing with 3 Forbidden Droplets, Book of Eclipse, Super Poly, and Triple Tactics Thrust into talents for the fusion duplication going first plays as well, plus Nadir Servant, Dogmatica Maximus for playing through extra hand traps, like things like Dominus Impulse. If they go Dominus Impulse, okay, whatever, you go Nadir Servant. So like this deck has a lot of options, especially under Mulcharmy. That's why I do rank it so highly, because this deck just has like way better Mulcharmy lines than any other deck that I just basically you know, presented us. I like Labyrinth, but I think Labyrinth hasn't been performing as a lot of people thought it would be, honestly, this format. And I do think that Branded is very underrated, this format, so I do like implore you guys to try it out. There's a lot, you know, people just gotta give it a try and a whirl and give it a good shot, because it actually does have a fairly good matchup into Malice and into Ryzeal. You just have to have like correct deck building around it, and I like this guy's 50 card build. I think it's like very good. He runs 1 Branded in white for like the extra plays too on the crackback, because a lot of these games are going to game 3 and 5, so I can understand that. And Book of Eclipse is also just like broken in this deck, because if they go Imperm on your Aluber, you can just chain Book of Eclipse and you just go full combo. So a lot of the time, just between the Nadirs and Book of Eclipse and Thrust, you were just never losing going first, and he's running the DD Vice King Requiem for the lock. A lot of people just don't like the lock, but at the end of the day, this is still one of Branded's best options. He's even running the 2 Quem, which is still good for combo lines at the end of the day. It's kind of bricky, but, you know, it worked out for him. And, you know, even without no draw power and just running a ton of board breakers, he managed to take a really nice finish at this regional, and I love to see it. 2 Grand Guignol on the side, 1 Mirror Jade, 1 Lulu. Interesting. And then the 1 Garura for the Super Poly, and then just 3 Artifact Scythe, Nibiru, and the 2 Fusion Duplication, and D-Barrier for going first, and Masquerade for time. You'll love to see it. And then for our last deck here, we do have Goblin Bikers, which took a top 8 finish at this Port Louis Regional, and is a very good matchup into decks like Ryzeal, with Ryzeal being now this Exceed powerhouse, just being like the top deck in the room. And this deck basically having a bunch of cards that say detach one Xyz material from either field. So it can detach all of Ryzeal's monsters by simply resolving their effects. Um, and it allows them to extend even harder if your opponent just has the Xyz material. So it's very good into the current meta, and it only gets better post Suda with the new support. So I do think that this is going to be one of the better options to go forward. It might get a little bit more expensive depending on the rarity of the new stuff, but I kind of doubt it will be expensive. So I think it will still reside as like the best budget deck because with the new support and its best matchup call into the fact it's like the best matchup call into Ryzeal, I think it's going to be very good. It doesn't have a great like Malice matchup or like other matchups, but it can still make like a pretty decent board, especially with the post pseudo stuff. So I'd highly recommend checking out Goblins, Branded, and like the Ritual Beast and the rest of the top decks, and any of these decks on this list, obviously. So if you guys want to see more videos like that, please let me know down below.